Good afternoon and welcome. We gather today in beloved community to recognize the influence that Tom had upon our hearts and our minds, an influence that endures as long as our own lives endure, and then even beyond us, in the people that we have known and loved. Immortality ripples from each of us like this, spreading out in all directions from the lives that each and every one of us lives. This thought about the ripple effect we have upon the world and the people in it reminds me of John Updike's words, in which he reflects upon the uniqueness and hence incredible value that every life holds. In Perfection Wasted, he writes, "And another regrettable thing about death is the ceasing of your own brand of magic, which took a whole life to develop and market. The quips, the witticisms, the slant adjusted to a few. Those loved ones nearest the lip of your stage, their soft faces blanched in the footlight glow, their laughter close to tears, their tears confused with their diamond earrings, their warm pooled breath in and out with your own heartbeat. Their response in your performance intertwined. The jokes over the phone, the memories packed in the rapid access file. The whole act. Who will do it again? That's it. No one. Imitators and descendants are simply not the same." Well, we have lost Tom's brand of magic. So grief is understandable at a time like this, which is why we gather together in love and support of one another. We will listen today to the wondrous music Tom so dearly loved. And we will speak memories and stories we carry in our hearts and minds. And we will shed tears per Sappho, that ancient Greek poetress who said, "What cannot be said will be wept. What cannot be said will be wept." Mostly, though, we wish to feel our gathering today to be a celebration of Tom's life. His was a full life and a life well lived. Indeed, we should see Tom's departure from this world not as a tragedy, but as the completion of a wondrous, blessed, and meaningful life on earth. In that spirit, the words of Rabindranath Tagore also come to mind. Tagore wrote, "Peace, my heart. Let the time for parting be sweet. Let it not be a death, but completeness. Let love melt into memory and pain into song. Let the flight through the sky end in the folding of the wings over the nest. Let the last touch of your hands be gentle, like the flower of the night. Stand still, O beautiful end, for a moment, and say your last words in silence. I bow to you and hold up my lamp to light your way."
Welcome, everyone. It's good to have you here with us. And welcome to the live streamer, people that are joining us around the world on the live stream. Wish you could be with us. We miss you. So I'm speaking for the family. I'm Jeffrey Stegman, for those of you that don't know me, from the perspective of a son, along with my brother Todd. And others will share their perspectives, because knowing Tom in these many different ways is part of really honoring him. The musicians from the symphony and Audrey sharing the music, the language that Tom loved best, really. So we're here to celebrate and honor Tom and celebrate the outsized, large effect that he's had on Cincinnati and on many of us. So one way to honor Tom is to try to understand him and to understand, his brand of magic and, why he affected so many of us. So perhaps we can explore that a little bit today. What are his characteristics, his ethics that he lived by, and know more about him. So he didn't lecture us about how to live. He was an example that we could learn from, and it's part of his legacy, his brand of magic that we can follow. And we can't fully honor Tom without recognizing Dee. Many of the things they did together very, very well, and family, supporting the arts, especially the symphony, and some things they did individually. So for family, Todd and I, Kathy and Audrey, and Ben, Claire, and Maddie, who's in Spain, Miles, and now, of course, Tara and Charlie and the grandkids. For them, Tom was the rock. He was family, holding the young kids, playing, swinging on the swing in Maine, driving the boat, always there with a smile and in a natural curiosity about our lives and how each of us were doing. The slideshow, if you haven't seen it, and the posters are a great, little slice of those family moments. So Mom was the unconditional, loving glue holding the family together, planning, organizing, cooking, bringing us together in Maine in the summers. So family was an important part of his life. So Tom had a degree in physics. I don't know if you know that, from UC, where he met Dee. He's a rocket scientist of sorts, working at Avco, a company that supplied the military. And because he was against the Vietnam War, he left there and joined his father, Clifford Sr., and his brother, Clifford Jr., at Osborne Coinage and Duran Manufacturing. So we can learn from that he was intelligent, maybe a rocket scientist is the way to say it. He was a principled man, and he lived by his principles in that case. So Tom was an extraordinary businessman. Together with Clifford Sr. and Clifford Jr., they built Osborne and Duran and helped many people to have a good career and to live a good life at that time. And then, I think it was in the 80s, Tom and Todd and I parted way with our uncle and cousins, and Todd and I joined Osborne and Duran, and we got to see up close and personal what made him extraordinary in business and in other domains as well. And here are some of the things that we noticed. So integrity. So at the core of Tom's ethics was doing the right thing. Todd reminded me of a trip to New York Transit Authority in New York City to bid on tokens for New York subway and the toll bridges, And we were told, you have to make payments. You have to make bribes in order for things to happen. And he told them in no uncertain terms that there'd be a cold day in hell before that happened, or something, worse. I'm not sure. And we still got the job. So he passed on to Todd and I the ethically clean way of doing business. You follow the law, you follow contracts, as well as handshake deals. You pay your taxes, you treat everybody well, including competitors. So part of this integrity was doing what's right in terms of the environment. Everything in the businesses were recycled, waste was minimized. Todd really picked this up and ran with it, installing solar panels on all the rooftops, and a good portion of our power came from solar. It was the right thing to do, and it made good business sense. So another thing that we've noticed about Tom is each person matters. So there's a Unitarian Universalist first principle, valuing the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Tom lived that in a way that was extraordinary. It was core to the business success, to our later business success, I believe, or we believe, Todd and I, and core to how he connected individually. And Tom was really a one-on-one type of person. He wasn't super gregarious, but he saw and appreciated each individual person, was curious and compassionate about their life, about their family, and saw their gifts and skills and how they individually contributed to the larger mission. And that was really true in the business, walking around, talking to people, in every role. And it, really applied as well to the artists and the musicians to really get to know them personally. And for him, merit mattered. He recognized the individual person's gifts, their skills, and what it took to get those gifts and skills. The diligence, the training, the work, the practice, they were appreciated by him and seen as precious to the expression of the gifts, of the person's gifts, and for the larger good and for the mission. For him, personal responsibility matters. Tom held our feet to the fire sometimes to do the best job, to get the best result. He had high standards and gave instant feedback. And some people saw that as harsh sometimes, and it was uncomfortable sometimes, but you knew where the edges of your abilities were. You knew where you stood. And that straight up feedback is how we grow. And so I really appreciated that about him. Coddling was not in his vocabulary. It was, you performed. And once you were ready, Tom did not micromanage. As is easy for many people to do who are really good at things. He trusted you instead to take the responsibility and do what you do best. So in a family business, it's often difficult for a patriarch or a matriarch to let go and step aside. And Tom did that gracefully. He really did. So Todd and I could be ourselves, run the business ourselves, and his advice was there when we needed it. So for him, the commitment to the larger good matters. The individual contribution to the collective mission of the group, of the organization, of the country, of the world. So he enlisted us in these missions with his passion. So in the business, it was around making a positive impact on the world, with ethical, positive contribution to the markets we serve, to the people who are customers, and to the world in terms of environmentally, and contributing by donating, contributing with taxes. He was one of those people that was okay with paying taxes. So an important part of the mission in a business is being successful and profitable, so that all the boats can rise on that tide, so that each person there could have a good career and provide a good life for their families as he had done. So individual creative expression was part of that, supporting the mission, and the individual, the problem-solving, discovery, teamwork that goes along with that. And in the musical arts, really the same principles applied. Concert Nova, the Linton Series, Cincinnati Symphony, and other places that Tom and Dee were involved in. There was a mission. And the mission of music, I'll just paraphrase my own opinion, is touching deeply of an individual listener's heart, elevating their life through the creative expression of beauty music. And beauty moved Tom and Dee. The beauty of visual art, and especially the beauty and depth of music touching their hearts. And one of my cherished memories later in Tom's life was seeing his joy and Dee's joy, listening to live piano with Audrey at the Kenwood. So experiencing beauty and joy, it was their generous nature to share it. And they applied their skills, their love, their warmth, as well as the financial fruits of the business and the cars collecting to support the arts, particularly music in Cincinnati, to flourish. And as he did with the business, Tom and Dee deeply appreciated each musician and conductor for the experience and glimpse of beauty that we see. In a beautiful performance. So in the visual arts, Tom and Dee supported Mark Fox and Tony Lunsman. I think Mark is joining us on the live stream for sure. With performance space, living space, and much more. And I learned from that the power of supporting individuals deeply and personally with what they need to, take the next step in their career and their life, as well as supporting organizations. So on to cars. For Tom, collector cars were another expression of beauty. It was a joyful playground for him. He very likely enjoyed that much more than the business. So he applied his intelligence, his curiosity, his passion to deeply diving into what was special and what was unique and beautiful, historical and rare about certain makes and models of cars. And by following his passion and applying his intelligence and curiosity, he was very successful at buying and selling European race and sports cars. He loved driving and racing them, and it was a sad day when he could no longer drive. So he teamed up with Jerry Pantis, who's going to speak later, to research, learn, and experience different models, makes and models of cars, in following his passion. So Tom's modesty and his earnest desire to share beauty and the story of each car is something many of you might have experienced, visiting his garage. There were numerous fundraising parties there, using that asset and that beautiful space to support the arts and other good causes. So experiencing music is an important part of today, as Tom would have wanted. And thank you to all the musicians playing and musicians who touch our hearts as their job and vocation. Tom in his modesty may have been uncomfortable with all these things we're saying about him. In fact, I know he would be. But while we're together, let's take a minute, take a moment together with the power of this collective energy and just send Tom our thanks, our best wishes. Bless him in a way that works for you, works for each of us. And you can just close your eyes if you wish, and I'll just come back in a minute and just. Thank you. I think we made him even more uncomfortable. Send him lots of love. Thank you. So I'd like to introduce Diane Haygood next. Diane worked with Tom and Todd and I for more than 40 years at Osborne and Duran, finally as HR director, supported Tom at the garage, and has been taking care of details for Dee and Tom lately. Please welcome part of the Stegman family, Diane Haygood.
Well, before I start, I'm going to preface it. I wrote up something before, but I swear me and Jeff did not get together. And what I'm going to say is I'm just a living example of someone he took interest in, he cared about, and supported. So it's going to sound like we got together on this. So I'm just saying that up front. So if you knew or ever met Tom, you already know he was special. A kind, generous, and caring soul who loved and lived life. So I stand before you only to share how I came to know him and develop not only a working relationship, but a true friendship that has lasted over 4 decades. For those of you here who are unaware, my relationship with Tom and the Stegman family began over 40 years ago when I joined Osborne Coinage Company as an accounting assistant, having served in this capacity for various other family and privately held companies. I answered this small 4-line ad through the Enquirer, they don't do that no more, not knowing where Massachusetts Avenue was or that there was a private mint in Cincinnati. I interviewed on a Monday with Cliff and Tom and left feeling pretty well about it. Called back on Thursday to see if they had made a decision, and Cliff informed me that they had selected another candidate. And I responded, impossible, that's my job. On Friday, I received a call offering me the position, and of course, I said yes. See you on Monday morning. Little did I know this would be one of the best decisions of my life and career. I reported to work that next Monday, ready to go. Working closely with Cliff and Tom, I was quickly acclimated to the culture of the company. People gave me little messages, watch out for Tom. He's kind of hard, walks quiet, carries a big stick. And so, smaller in stature with Cliff, Tom was perceived as the tougher of the brothers, but soon I learned he had a big heart. He cared about people. He took time and regularly interacted with the employees, walking through the plant to shake hands and chat. And that small gesture and practice made a profound impact on all the employees. They could constantly talk about it. Oh, I remember when Tom would come down, everybody was happy to see him. When he retired and he came for events, everybody was happy to see him. Fast forward 19 years, when Tom invited me to go to lunch and made me an offer I could not refuse, to become the office manager of his car collection, Marble Alley Motor Cars. And I responded, I don't know anything about cars, and I'm not the best driver. He said, good. He said, your car knowledge and driving skills is not required. He said, I trust and value you and the work you are doing for Osborne. Appreciate your professionalism, loyalty, and work ethic. Working closely with Tom in this role, our relationship blossomed into a friendship where he patiently mentored me to take on the role of his personal assistant and general manager of Stegman Auto. Tom invested a lot of time in me for this role, for which I am immensely grateful. Sharon exposed me to things that he loved. Whether it was with the artists, we talked about that. Anything he loved and cared about, he supported. He supported not only financially, but with opportunities. There has to be opportunity, okay, inclusion and opportunity. So I kind of mentioned to him that I would like to serve on a board one day. And so next Monday he came in, paperwork. He recommended me to take the business on board course. It was a year long. I completed, and I am board certified. Finally stating I was ready to take over the other duties he was still performing, I said, are you still going to continue to help me with the complicated calculations needed for cost basis and tax prep? He stated, I'll sharpen the pencils for you. And so, yes, he had a sense of humor, and I was one of the few people who witnessed that, his funny side, and a lot of other sides too. So yes, Tom was a kind and generous mentor with a big heart. I am proud to call him friend. He never failed to acknowledge the contributions at Marble Alley through events. Me and Joe, he acknowledged us all the time when we had events. He could not do it without us. He did not take credit for everything that happened. He knew he needed people around him, and he loved his team. Boy. God blessed me, and I'm so blessed, with 3 angels in my lifetime. Fred Haygood, which is my brother, I have to always acknowledge that. Norman Batchelor, my aunt. And who would have thought when I answered that little ad, Tom Stegman, that I will thank and always remember as my dear friend, not only changed my life, but the life of my family as well. I thank Dee and the Stegmans for sharing Tom with me. There will never be goodbye or an end, only decades of memories that I'll always treasure, and we're always forever together. Thanks.
I hope that you all realize how difficult it is to follow Audrey, these incredible musicians, Jeff's speech, Diane's speech. I swear we didn't do our speeches together, so I apologize in advance. So I was Tom's car friend. The cars matter a lot, because as we know, Tom and Dee were amongst the most generous people most of us have ever met. Planned Parenthood, the Symphony, the Cincinnati Art Museum benefited so much in so many different ways from Tom's hobby and passion and Dee's incredible support for this. So I'm from Canada, soon to be your 51st state, I understand. I could have never wished to meet someone like Tom. He was the first of two angels in my life. A very special human being, Dee, Tom, really extraordinary people. He really had an insatiable desire to experience as many cars as he could. It was something, in a way, he couldn't control, you know. And we met because of a little problem he had with a car, and he reached out to me out of the blue. Next thing I knew, I was on a plane to Cincinnati, and the rest is history. And I've come to know your amazing city and the people who live here. Probably visited 25 or more times over the years. The man I knew was a solitary man. He could handle himself amongst people, but mainly I saw him as someone who enjoyed the quiet and peaceful life with his dogs, for example. He so appreciated Dee and loved her so much. 50 years ago, Tom bought a car that cost more than his house. And we have to say, you know, Dee might have thought that wasn't a great idea. But she supported it. I'm sure, I didn't know them then, but I'm sure for Tom that support was an absolutely necessary part of making that decision. And I know that many people will benefit from that decision that came from Dee. He loved his boys, you know, Jeff and Todd, and loved his grandchildren. I mean, I knew him as a family man. He spoke so highly of his grandchildren. He really appreciated Diane and Joe, and it really wasn't possible to do what he did without them. But back to the dogs. On one of my trips to Cincinnati, you can't get there from here. That's what you say about Montreal to Cincinnati. There's always a stopover. And on one of my stopovers, Tom called and said, well, I've been looking forward to your visit, but one of the dogs is sick. And I was just about to board the plane, and, you know, such a modest and clear-minded person. He didn't say, don't come, but yeah, he loved those dogs, and they came first. Yeah, I mean, he was unlike anyone I ever met. He just had an incredibly clear mind. He could think so mathematically without making you feel he was thinking mathematically. He was just highly intelligent, very successful businessman. He understood people. He really understood people's motivations, which is an extraordinary lesson for me. You know, he could see through people. He was a person of exceedingly high integrity. I mean, the highest integrity I ever came into contact with. Fulfilling his expectations were really, truly one of the highlights of my life. They brought me to another level of thinking and responsibility. I think for Tom, there's a British lord, Ashley Montagu, himself a car guy, who famously said the idea is to die young, as late as possible, right? And I think Tom had, he had such a gentlemanly demeanor, and It was hard to see in a way, but I knew, what was inside of this man was the curiosity of a passionate and really precocious child. And I mean that in the most, sincere way. Like, he really was curious. He cared. He loved to learn. And because of his eye and the way he saw beauty, art, music, the creations of man, and cars, long before anyone saw them as art. Today we all know cars are art. But when Tom came to love these cars and learn about them, he saw something that most people didn't, And it sounds trite to say today, something like a car is art, but how that happened really has to do with his soul, what's inside of him, what satisfies his view of the world, the beauty he sees in classical music or art, and that happened with cars. And of course it was infectious and something that we shared. I'm almost done, I'm sorry for, but he really was far ahead of his time in understanding that. Meeting Tom and Dee really changed my life in many ways. There's a saying, a person's true wealth is the good he or she does for the world. And it's one thing that they've helped in that financial sense, but they've instilled that. I'm sure many of you have experienced that feeling, but it really changed who I am from a feeling of what generosity and responsibility feels towards other people. And, I attribute much of that to Tom and Dee. With that generosity, you'd expect people to have expectations from people. But these people are so modest and so humble, and it's humbling to be around this kind of strength. They give without expectations, and I've never seen this type of thing. At one of Tom's events, he would have people from the symphony over to the shop, and I attended this one, and the cars were on display, and there was music being played, and one of the symphony members came up to Tom and I. We were just making small talk, and she said she didn't know who Tom was. And she said, well, what, are you guys here for the cars or for the music? And Tom did that wry little smile that he has in his little snicker, like that. And he said, well, I really like them both. And that was Tom. It's like what lived inside of him was more important than what people saw. That kind of modesty is just something extraordinary, in my opinion. It's just something that lives inside of a person, and it's a confidence that's just such a pleasure to be around and can teach us all so much. He could have ingratiated himself and said, well, this is mine. And he would never think of something like that, which is something extraordinary about him. And leads me to the next point. He taught me probably the second most important lesson in my life, which was, he didn't teach, as Jeff said, he wouldn't dictate anything. It exuded from him. It was the way he lived. And what he taught me was just to not waste energy on something you can't change. That's Tom for me. He was a man who moved forward, whose intelligence led him to the future. He was never anchored by the past. And that applied to success as much as it did to failure. There's just was no point in hanging on to any of it. So that combination of passion, without kind of weighty sentimentality, is what led Tom to own over 100 cars over his lifetime. He would love them, he'd experience them, he'd see a greater purpose for them. We did over 30 things together, and he never once said to me that, oh, I wish I didn't, And this is an extraordinary characteristic. This is not something that he had to make an effort to feel. It was genuinely his way of dealing with things. He was merely a curator for a time, and they did truly lead to a greater good. I taught him something too. Is funny little anecdote. My mother's Italian. Italians hug. I'd hug Tom when I saw him. He didn't take it too well at first. I think he'd even kind of recoil in expectation of that hug. But he got used to it. I think, I saw him a lot and give him a hug. And so I think I taught him to tolerate hugs. I'm done now. So I've read some of Maya Angelou's writings, out of respectful curiosity. And one of the things she said really makes me think of Tom and Dee. And it's that people may forget what you did, but they won't forget how you made them feel. And Tom's trust really gave me strength, his passion gave me hope. And their generosity really made me understand how the world works from a larger perspective. If we all just gave a little bit, the way Tom and Dee did, we wouldn't think of our governments, we wouldn't have to. That wry smile, it was so rewarding to see him smile. So, there are no goodbyes for Tom and I. He'll always be in my heart.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Robert McGrath, and I am the new president and CEO of the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra. I want to begin today by thanking Dee and the entire Stegman family for this opportunity to gather us as a community and to really gift us with insights and lessons into who Tom was as a complete human being. And thank you also to Audrey and the musicians who have performed so far and that will perform for their musical selections and for performances that have really invoked that sense of beauty that we know Tom cherished. So on behalf of the entire Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra family, it's an honor for me to reflect on the extraordinary life of Tom Stegman and celebrate a man whose spirit and passion shaped the lives of those around him in such unique ways. Tom was one of the first board members I met when I came to the CSO in 2011. And that value that was referenced earlier of that he held dear of how each person matters is definitely something that he made me feel as a new member of the community. If you had the privilege of knowing Tom, you quickly learned that there was one thing that touched him deeply, more than almost anything else: music. For Tom, surrounding himself with music was synonymous with living a good life. In fact, if you ever paid a visit to his home, you were undoubtedly welcomed by classical music piping through the sound system 24/7. Moreover, Tom and Dee made the CSO a fixture of their Saturday evenings for more than 50 years as loyal subscribers, donors, and volunteers. They built their community at Music Hall, making friends with audience members and, as we've heard today, musicians alike. And though in recent years, Tom was unable to attend CSO concerts, to this day, the vision of Tom and Dee sitting in the front row of the balcony of Music Hall is indelible. That's how much they've made the CSO a part of their everyday lives. But Tom's connection to music and the CSO wasn't only as a fan or spectator. He rolled up his sleeves, leaned in, and supported the CSO with his time and treasure, contributing his business acumen, his passion for music, and his resources into something that yielded dividends for the CSO and our entire community. He embraced our vision with conviction, and he understood the power of stepping up to serve. Tom was for many years an active member of the CSO's board of directors and later named, very deservingly so, an emeritus board member. Notably, he was a strong supporter of MEMI and Riverbend Music Center, and he was very astute about MEMI's impact on the CSO as a key funding source to help sustain an orchestra of our caliber in Cincinnati. As we've heard from many of the business anecdotes shared earlier, he was a visionary who understood the importance of keeping a business fresh and relevant. For instance, as a member of the board's facilities committee, after Riverbend's lawn became the first U.S. amphitheater with a synthetic turf, Tom backed another innovation, installing video screens for better lawn viewing. When the screens were installed in 2014, MEMI CEO Mike Smith gave Tom a giant remote control to turn them on from the lawn for the first time, and Tom loved it. As it turns out, Riverbend became one of the first, if not the first, amphitheater to add video screens to the lawn experience, and now they can be found in every venue across the country. Tom was an integral part of the CSO family, and he was ever present for the CSO's big moments: international tours, recording projects, the acquiring of instruments, Louis Langre's music director launch, Luminosity. Tom Stegman and Dee were there for it all. He was truly a champion for the orchestra, and we are forever grateful for his unwavering friendship and leadership through the years. Tom will be missed, but his influence lives on in the causes he championed, the conversations we continue, the lives we touch, and the memories that we cherish as an orchestra family. So let us carry his memory with us in gratitude as we go forward, because in the end, it is love, connection, and the music we make together that will endure. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ted Nelson, retired musician from the CSO, involved with Tom through Concert Nova. And I'll admit that when I was asked to speak, I thought, wow, really? Because, I mean, I had great affection for Tom and Dee, and I wasn't sure if I knew him that well. And so I will give the disclaimer also that none of us compared notes. And I'm very happy to say that what I'm about to share about my experience apparently was a pretty good reflection. So the first time I toured Asia with the Cincinnati Symphony, we stayed at the Mandarin Oriental in Singapore, which is a very, very fancy hotel. Waterfalls, ropes, and a breakfast buffet that I think took up 3 rooms. But it's not the first hotel that comes up when I search hotels.com for a place to stay. You might also know how real estate listings are sometimes a little optimistic, and they'll describe properties as Hyde Park adjacent or Indian Hill adjacent. I've often thought that the classical music world is fancy adjacent. We orbit very intimidating spheres of wealth and privilege and success without always feeling like we belong. Many of our most enthusiastic and dedicated supporters are people we would never cross paths with, except for that adjacency. The Stegmans have clearly had a profound impact on our city's cultural fabric, particularly through their support of the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra. Year after year, the Stegmans stood as pillars of support for this institution that brings so much beauty and value to our community. Now, Concert Nova, the chamber group that my wife founded 20 years ago, is in many ways the opposite of a lot of the fanciness that we find somewhere like music hall. Concert Nova tries very hard to bring the art we love to people who might never otherwise find it. And Ixie reminded me of what we believe is the first concert that Tom and Dee attended, which was called The Four Seasons of Blank, and featured music of Aaron J. Kernis, I had Vivaldi and Piazzolla. Tom loved it. He was captivated by the subject matter, the food, and the intimate performance setting. And that evening sparked a connection that never wavered from that night on. Tom and Dee became passionate advocates for Concert Nova, nurturing our chamber group and helping it flourish. They showed up at funky venues, basements, bars, restaurants, galleries. They experienced some music that I'm sure they didn't expect to hear. And they understood the importance of sustaining not only the art that happens on the biggest stages in our city, but the art that happens on the most intimate, smallest stages and the intimate expressions of classical music that groups like Concert Nova can present. The fancy that they brought was in the form of their passion and their exuberant spirit and their love, their genuine love of everything that we did. The first time I remember meeting Tom and Dee was at the Garage, and it was a truly breathtaking place. I don't know a lot about cars, but I could walk through and look at them and see how beautiful they were, and also see how Tom was so proud of them and so happy to share the joy that he took in these beautiful things, and to share it with people, to share it with the symphony family, to share it with the Concert Nova family. There was genuine joy, and it captures so much about what I experienced of who he was. The passion for the things he loved, and his eagerness to share that passion with others. And his face, the way that his face would just light up as he would introduce a car was really, really incredible. With Tom and with Dee, there was never any pretense. There was never any barrier. There was no adjacency. There was just Tom. There was never anything performative about his appreciation or support. He was just there, warm, authentic, genuinely interested in the people behind the music. Tom and Dee were not content to just write checks from a distance. The personal relationships they built with Ixie, my wife, with me, recently with our golden retriever Lulu, and with our entire Concert Nova family were incredibly rewarding and heartfelt. They engaged, they listened, they connected with the artists they supported in ways that really transcend what are typical patron relationships. They attended performances not out of obligation, but out of love for the music and for the musicians themselves. Tom would arrive at concerts with his characteristic understated smile, greeting performers by name, asking thoughtful questions about the details of our lives that he knew and remembered. He made everyone feel valued, not just for what they could do, but for who they were. In a world where patronage sometimes feels transactional, Tom and Dee showed us what it means to support art and artists with your whole heart. They understood that sustaining culture isn't about funding it, it's about fostering community, being present, and about real human connection. Ixie and I feel so blessed to have spent time in Dom and Dee's circle and to have benefited from their friendship. Cincinnati and the world are better places because of Tom, and I can't imagine a better way for us to say goodbye as a group than this musical celebration. So thank you. We would like to invite anyone who would like to share their thoughts or reflection at this time. Yes, it is here as promised. Feel free to come forward, or we'll bring the mic to you if you'd like to share.
'78, and at that time I was a planner with the Cincinnati City Planning Commission and working downtown in City Hall in Cincinnati, and Tom was a city councilman in Wyoming, and I didn't know much about Wyoming. I for sure knew where Wyoming was located, but I didn't know much else. I'd heard high taxes, but I also had not heard the name Tom Stegman before. And so in that year, the city of Wyoming initiated a program to help homeowners in the oldest section of downtown Wyoming, kind of at the railroad tracks where Wyoming Avenue is. And the city kind of ran into, they were proceeding along the way and they kind of ran into a speed bump early on. And that's when an associate and I got a call to come out to city council and maybe talk about how we might handle this situation. And so we did that. We went out and met with the city council in Wyoming once, and then we went back out and met with them twice, and the third time, I think it was the fifth meeting, when the situation devolved into chaos, and people were yelling, and until one city council member stood up and announced that the village could not afford to fail in this effort, and that this must move ahead, and that he would take personal responsibility for this project. And I thought that was pretty powerful. What was more powerful was that nobody objected. And despite all the hoo-ha that had gone on, there was nothing else that was said. And we moved forward under the watchful eye of Tom Stegman for the next 2.5 years to help homeowners renovate their houses in that section of Wyoming. And we had kind of a pretty simple model that, when you approach a neighborhood to do that, you go in and find a house that's for sale, and you acquire the property, and then you renovate it, and you put your project office there. So we found such a house on Vine Street, north of Wyoming Avenue, and a local savings loan acquired it for us and put it into the project, and so we were ready to go to renovation and put our office in there, and we just had one problem, and that was Edwina Robinson and her 2 boys. And Edwina had been renting this house from the former owner before he sold it, and whether he gave Edwina an eviction notice or not, we never knew. But what we did know is that she didn't have any place to go. Plus, she was a dispatcher for the Wyoming City Police Department. So there was a lot of incentive to make this come out right. So it was all hands on deck, and we were able to find Edwina an apartment in the community where she and her sons could live happily. And we went ahead and renovated the house on Vine Street, put our office in there, and conducted project activity for the rest of that year. When Edwina's lease was up for the house that she was renting, or the apartment she was renting, she was able to come back and become the owner of the house that she had formerly rented on Vine Street. Now, none of this would have happened without the initiative of Tom Stegman. And by about this time, Wyoming was rubbing off on me, and I decided that it was time to buy a sports car. And so I had an MGA when I was in college, and it was an absolute disaster. It was like Murphy's Law on steroids. And whatever could go wrong did go wrong. And sometimes things that couldn't go wrong did go wrong anyway. And, but I thought, well, this is 1980, and certainly I ought to be able to walk into a dealership and buy a brand new MGB off the showroom floor, and it would run right and be on the road more than in the shop. And it would start in the winter, just basic stuff. Well, that one turned out to be more like the 2 best days of a boat owner's life, which is the first and the last. And so I knew I needed to sell this car to somebody who knew something about sports cars. And so I was up at City Hall in Wyoming, and I was talking to Chief Donovan, who was the fire chief, and a big Irish guy, and he said, well, look, you want to sell that car, you need to take it over to Stegman's place because he's a sports car guy. And so I had no idea. And so I went over and I parked on the circle, and Tom came out. And Tom had an almost collegial way of scoffing at really bad ideas. And so for the first few moments of our conversation, there was a lot of scoffing going on. And then he started to walk away. And but what I could tell was he was walking toward his garage at his house, and he just went and raised the garage door. And in that moment, I realized what the term sports car guy was all about. And so Tom and I had a partnership for upwards of 20 years involving the acquisition, renovation, and operation of historic properties on the west side of downtown Cincinnati. And during that time, I was introduced to the garage and had numerous visits to the garage. And one day I walked in out there, it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I saw Tom. He was standing there in the entryway, and he was standing there holding a carburetor. And to me, a carburetor is a part that goes in an engine, goes in a car near the engine, and helps make it go. But Tom was fascinated with this carburetor, and he wanted to come over and explain to me how it worked. And of course, that was the essence of Tom Stegman. It was his inquiring mind and his attention to detail that made all the difference in the world. And so for me, the opportunity to work with Tom Stegman was truly an honor. And it was more of an honor to get to know him and his wonderful family. And so for those things, I stand very grateful. Thank you.
You'll notice in the program today, after the closing words, we have a song listed. But for the sake of time, and because there is a reception afterward, we're going to skip that song. But we are going to do, the musical offering and postlude, nevertheless. So follow these closing words. Please remain seated for the musical offering and the postlude. And after the postlude, allow the family to exit the sanctuary first, and you can greet them in the foyer and in the dining hall if you're going to stay for the reception. So we end this celebration of Tom's life recognizing that though he is now gone from us in body, he remains with us in spirit, in the hearts and minds of all who loved him. This is a form of immortality, and also, I believe, evident in the wisdom of the poet, with whose words we close our service. When I die, give what's left of me to little children and old folks who wait to die. When you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give to me. I want to give you something more than words, so look for me in the people I've known and loved. You can love me most by letting hands touch hands, letting bodies touch bodies, and letting hearts touch hearts. Love doesn't die. People do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away.
Dee's favorite song, and I think Tom loved it too, Hallelujah. And when the chorus repeats in the end, please join us with your voice if you would like. And if